The night shift had always been the loneliest place in the world, but that night felt different, like the walls themselves were watching him breathe. The dim hallway lights flickered over polished floors, reflecting a tired man pushing a mop as if it were the only thing holding his life together. Every step echoed with a quiet desperation, the kind that no one notices until it's too late. That janitor was Armin Qureshi, a single father who had learned to survive in silence, carrying the weight of a broken past and a fragile future on his shoulders. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unseen struggles, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Lifeline Tales. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest acts of humanity can change everything. Armin had not always been invisible. There was a time when his laughter filled small rooms, when his dreams were bigger than his fears. But life had a way of rewriting plans without warning. After losing his wife during a sudden illness, he found himself alone with a 5-year-old daughter, Meher, whose innocent eyes carried questions he could never fully answer. The hospital bills swallowed his savings, and the world he once knew slowly collapsed into something colder and harsher. Pride didn't survive long when survival became the only goal. The job at the corporate tower was never supposed to be permanent. It was meant to be a stepping stone, a temporary way to keep food on the table. But months turned into years, and Armin became just another shadow in the building, cleaning offices that belonged to people who would never know his name. He worked late nights because the pay was slightly better, and because it allowed him to spend mornings with Meher, walking her to school and pretending, just for a few hours, that life was normal. Every morning, he would braid her hair clumsily, making her laugh when the strands didn't line up properly. He would pack her lunch with whatever he could afford, always slipping in a small note with a smiley face drawn in pen. Those little moments were his anchor, the only proof that he was still doing something right in a life that often felt like a series of failures. But the nights were different. Nights were when doubts crept in. Nights were when exhaustion wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. As he cleaned empty offices, he would glance at framed certificates, expensive furniture, and glowing computer screens left on standby, wondering what it must feel like to belong to a world like that. He never envied the wealth itself, he envied the stability, the certainty that tomorrow wouldn't fall apart. That particular day had been harder than usual. Meher had come home from school unusually quiet, her small face clouded with something she was trying to hide. After gentle coaxing, she admitted that other children had laughed at her worn-out shoes. Armin had smiled and told her that shoes don't define who you are, but later that night, as he scrubbed a stubborn stain off a marble floor, the memory of her lowered eyes broke something inside him. He knew she deserved better, but better felt like a distant dream he could never quite reach. The clock on the wall read 2:17 a.m. when it happened. Armin was working alone on the executive floor, a place he usually avoided unless assigned. The air there felt different, heavier with importance. He moved quietly, almost instinctively trying not to disturb a silence that didn't belong to him. That was when he heard footsteps behind him, slow, deliberate, and unexpected at that hour. He turned, his heart skipping a beat, and saw a tall figure standing at the end of the hallway. The man was sharply dressed, his presence carrying an authority that didn't need to announce itself. Armin immediately lowered his gaze, assuming he had somehow made a mistake or broken a rule. Before he could speak, the man's voice cut through the stillness, calm yet firm, saying he had been watching him. Those words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Armin's mind raced through possibilities. Had he done something wrong, missed a spot, stayed in a restricted area? Fear mixed with confusion, tightening his chest. But there was something unusual in the man's tone, something that didn't sound like anger. The man stepped closer, revealing a face that was composed yet thoughtful, as if carrying a story of its own. This was Xavier Rahman, the CEO of the company, though Armin didn't immediately recognize him. Xavier observed him for a moment, not with the cold detachment Armin had come to expect from people in power, but with a quiet curiosity. Armin tried to explain himself, his words stumbling over each other, but Xavier raised a hand gently, signaling him to stop. There was no accusation in his eyes, only a strange sense of understanding. Xavier spoke about how he had noticed Armin over the past few months, how he always arrived early, stayed late, and worked with a dedication that went beyond what was expected. He mentioned the way Armin carefully adjusted objects on desks, as if respecting the lives behind them, and how he never cut corners, even when no one was around to check. Hearing this left Armin stunned. For years, he had believed he was invisible, just another worker blending into the background. The idea that someone had been paying attention felt almost unreal. Xavier continued, sharing something unexpected about his own past. He spoke about growing up in hardship, about nights when he had to choose between studying and working to support his family. He talked about how people often underestimate those who struggle silently, and how determination can exist in the most overlooked places. His voice carried no arrogance, only a quiet honesty that resonated deeply. Armin listened, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to conversations like this, especially not with someone of such stature. Part of him wanted to believe there was a reason behind this moment, while another part feared it might disappear as quickly as it had come. Days passed, but that encounter lingered in his mind. For the first time in years, something had shifted. It wasn't a dramatic change, but a subtle one, like a small light flickering in a dark room. Xavier began to appear more frequently during Armin's shifts, sometimes simply observing, other times asking about his life, his daughter, his struggles. The conversations were never long, but they carried weight. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. Armin was called into an office, his hands trembling slightly as he entered. He wasn't used to being summoned like that. Inside, he found Xavier waiting, along with a few other senior staff members. The atmosphere felt serious, but not hostile. Xavier explained that the company was starting a new initiative, one focused on providing opportunities to employees who had shown exceptional dedication but had never been given a chance to grow. He spoke about recognizing potential beyond job titles, about investing in people rather than just positions. Armin could barely process what he was hearing when Xavier mentioned his name as one of the first candidates. The room seemed to blur for a moment, the weight of the words almost too much to absorb. Years of silent effort, unnoticed sacrifices, and unspoken pain were suddenly being acknowledged. The journey that followed was not easy. Transitioning into a new role required learning skills he had never imagined needing. There were moments of doubt, moments when he questioned whether he truly belonged in that space. But each time he felt like giving up, he thought of Meher, of her quiet strength, and of the promise he had made to give her a better life. Slowly, things began to change. Armin's confidence grew, his abilities sharpening with each passing day. He was no longer just surviving, he was building something. Meher noticed it too, the way her father smiled more, the way his eyes carried hope instead of exhaustion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light through their small apartment window, Armin sat beside Meher as she showed him her schoolwork. Her laughter filled the room, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that life was finally turning in their favor. If this story is touching your heart, if it reminds you of someone who never gave up despite everything, take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your support helps stories like this reach more people who need hope. Before we reach the end, here's something special for you. Comment below. Kindness always finds its way back. Let's spread this message together.